Hello, my name is Blossoms and welcome to another Genshin Impact video, and today we're going to be taking a look at some team compositions for Sucrose, one of my favorite characters in the game, and today I've come up with a few teams to go ahead and show off with you guys, and just to, kind of give you guys some ideas on teams to build around her, or maybe just some fun team ideas in general for you. But obviously I didn't come up with every team in the game, so I'm sure I've missed out some cool combos, and if you have a cool team combination below, I would love to see it in the comment section. But without further ado, let's get into the video. So first off, we're gonna go ahead and say it is important to understand the elemental reactions and the different elemental resonances associated with team compositions when building a team in this game. Once you familiarize yourselves with those, it makes it a lot easier to go ahead and build some teams and utilize them to their utmost potential. With that said, let's go ahead and show off some of the aspects of Sucrose that are important to know when you're building a team around her. First off, we'll talk about the fact that she is an Anemo mage, so she's going to be focusing a lot on some swirl reactions. She's one of the best characters in the game for the Viridescent set here, that is going to allow you to debuff elements and allow your team to do huge damage. But not only that, you can really capitalize on the fact that she can bestow your team some huge amounts of elemental mastery. She gives 50 here for 8 seconds on different elemental swirl reactions. And then she also gives your team 20% of her own elemental mastery whenever you use some of her skills. Those are extremely important to keep in mind when building Sucrose or building teams around Sucrose, as you're going to be able to give your team that elemental mastery, making your elemental combos just deal that much more damage, and she's going to be able to keep everybody together to execute those combos. And on top of that, if you have the Viridescent set, that is going to allow her to debuff them, allowing you to just deal that much more damage. And with all of those combined, you can really fit Sucrose in a lot of teams, pretty much any team really, but I'm going to go over just some of the ones that I really like and some of the ones that I think might be the best. Alright, getting into the first team here, we have Sucrose, Tartaglia, Bennett, and Fischl. I think this team is really strong. It has a lot of elemental reaction potential and can handle pretty much any situation. You are missing a Claymore user, which does kind of suck a little bit, and you could probably fit one in here like Beto. I think that would be a really strong option, but Fischl is just a really strong support, and I think this team is fine by itself. I use this team quite often, actually. I constantly swap Sucrose in and out with this team in particular, and they're very strong. Being able to have Bennett as a good healer and buffing your team while Sucrose is keeping everybody crowd controlled allows you to really get a lot of elemental reactions going. And one of the favorite things I like about Sucrose is her debuff aspect. When you're using Hydro and Electro, it doesn't really matter which one you debuff, because if you're focusing on your Electro charged reactions, you're going to be doing more damage either way. So you don't really have to micromanage as much if you're focusing on Electro charged with Sucrose, as I really like that. Downside of this team is obviously the fact that its elemental resonance doesn't really have one. It's just the 4 unique elements, which the elemental resistance is nice, but the dual element teams can be pretty darn strong and definitely a contender when building your teams. Moving on to the second team here, we actually have Sucrose, Klee, Bennett, and Xingqiu. I try to leave out as many 5 stars that I don't have as I can, and most people don't really have 5 stars in the first place. I actually don't have Klee, but I know for a fact Sucrose can actually manipulate the mines Klee drops with her different skills, and that can make for an extremely deadly combo with Klee, as you're just going to be sucking everybody into one location. They're all going to be getting hit by Klee's bombs, making sure you're not missing any of the bombs. And then on top of that, with a team like this, you're getting the Fervent Flames bonus. It's getting that extra 25% attack, which is really darn strong. And then to top it all off, on top of that, the fact that Xingqiu is such a strong Hydro support, if you pair him with Klee, you're going to be getting constant vaporized procs and just allowing your team to deal huge amounts of damage. And you're not really going to be missing any of your damage with Klee, which I think is really strong and really valuable. Moving on to Team 3 here, we actually have Sucrose, Chongyun, Diona, and Xingqiu. You could swap Diona out for Chi-Chi. It's just more important to have like a support on the team. You could even use Barbara here and then use somebody like Kaya if you don't have either of these healers. That can also totally work. The main focus of this team, however, is the fact that you're just going to have a shatter comp here. You're going to be freezing people as often as possible, and then on top of that, the shattering ice is going to allow you to get increased crit rate on enemies that are frozen, which is really huge. And with the cryo set in the future on top of that is going to make your crit rate just entirely free on somebody like Chongyun. It's going to be absolutely incredible. And then you have Sucrose here is just going to be able to swirl that cryo debuffing as much as possible. And I think this is actually a really strong team. Keeping enemies frozen is highly underrated in the game. I think it's really strong crowd control as they literally can't move, and shatter comps actually do deal some pretty solid damage themselves. And then on top of that, you know, just having the debuff with Sucrose and just kind of the Chongyun shatter damage and how much his burst can actually do is just a really strong combo altogether. And this is definitely a team I'm going to mess around with. I did mess around with a little bit of this team in the Spiral Abyss, and I really enjoyed it. My Chongyun just isn't really built out yet, so I wasn't able to test it out in the later floors, but still testing it out in the earlier floors, it was just a ton of fun to use the team. And on top of that, it's also an extremely safe team, so you're just oftentimes just not getting damaged, especially if you have something like Diana's shield on. If they're not frozen and they actually manage to hit you, then you have Diana's shield to back up on, and I really enjoy that kind of loop. I also enjoy the AoE Diana provides with her elemental burst, as it does make up for the time that you're lacking with Chongyun's first skill when he doesn't have it up if you're not using something like Sacrificial Sword. So that's also something to note. And then moving on to the fourth team here, we actually have Sucrose, Zhongling, Barbara, and Fischl. This is just a really strong 4-star team. I actually used this 4-star team for a pretty long time in the beginning. I'd say this is kind of the team that got me through AR1 through 30 or so, as I got Zhongling and Sucrose on my first pulls there, so I was just kind of utilizing this team for the most part. I didn't have Barbara until AR20, but I used Noelle until then, and then I moved on to Barbara. And I just found it to be a really fun team. Sucrose and Zhongling by themselves are already a great combo. It kills pretty much all the mobs in the overworld just by swirling the pyro damage. But on top of that, Zhongling and Fischl are already also a crazy combo together. And the different elemental reaction potential of this team is very strong. It covers a lot of bases, and I think you really can't go wrong going this team. Obviously, the cons are still that it's not a double resonance team, so you're not getting any buffs like that, but I think the potential you gain on your elemental reactions more than makes up. And then finally, for the last team here is our free-to-play friendly team. I actually came up with 2 different teams here. And for the most part, I think the best in slot is probably going to be Sucrose, Zhongling, Barbara, and Kaya. Not too different from the one we just had with Fischl, but Fischl isn't technically free to play anymore. She kind of sits on the fence there. Free to play is getting a little bit more complicated every day, but this is just kind of what I'm going with for now. And I think this team is pretty darn strong. You still get the added benefit of Zhongling and Sucrose here being a really strong combo. And then on top of that, you actually gain melt comp potential with Kaya. And then you can also freeze people with Barbara if you want. There's just a lot of options on this team, and I think it's definitely something you don't want to sleep on. You do lose something like Overload and a Claymore user on this team, so you might have a problem with some Geo stuff. But other than that, this team is pretty well covered. And I think a good alternative to that is actually Sucrose, the Animo Traveler, Barbara, and Lisa. The big problem with this team is that you obviously have 3 Catalyst users, which is kind of wonky, and that's what I don't like about it. But on the upside, you do get the extra cooldown from the double Anemo, as well as the movement speed and stamina reduction is very nice. And then you can focus on things like the actual electrocharge reactions, which, as I said, pairing that with the Viridescent set on Sucrose is just really strong because it doesn't really matter which element you debuff on the enemy, as you're still going to be benefiting it from either way. This is a pretty strong team, and you could obviously swap out some other things. Like, you could probably use Noelle in this team instead of Barbara. That would also be pretty strong. You're just losing that vaporize potential. But Noelle can definitely cover the actual weakness of the team where they're lacking that Claymore and Geo to deal with shields, which can be very strong. So that's just something you want to consider. This is just kind of like a foot in the door for free to play, as just some options you might want to consider, but you definitely still have other options. Anyway, that's going to be it for the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed those different team comps, and as I said, if you have one of your own, please let me know in the comments below. I love to discuss those different team comps and how cool or fun they can be. Sucrose is one of my favorite characters, and I'm absolutely stoked for her teacher Albedo to come into the game. So I wanted to go ahead and get out this team composition build. I'll probably be doing a bunch of stuff for Albedo whenever he comes out. But as I said, I hope you enjoyed the video. My name is Blossoms, and I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day.